during his 2008 campaign, Americans were positive that Barack Obama was going to lead this country in a new direction, one that was completely different from the 8 dark years before him. But 6 years into this presidency, very little has changed, and those campaign promises from 2008 are just really a distant memory. Joining me now to explain what happened is David Bromwich, author of the new book, Moral Imagination. So, David, who is this guy? Don't you, it's kind of one of those questions you wake up and you say, there's a stranger in the room. There's a stranger in the room. Who is this? I mean, that's the kind of reaction I get constantly on this show.
Yeah, you mean about Barack Obama?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah, I think he is a strange person. And he is a strange person by the usual ways of judging, one's fellow human beings socially, in any context. Not the strangest to have become president. I think Nixon's still farther out than that. But I don't think he's a stranger. I think that the basic facts about his biography, as we know them, are pretty plain. And I think the fundamentals of his ideology are clear too, and are pretty much as he presented them in the general election campaign, not in the primaries where he was looking to move to the left of Hillary Clinton, but in the general election, they've stayed pretty much what they were then. But he is not someone who has a talent for politics or who ever had much interest in politics as we understand it, which involves a couple of abilities and competences that are very remote from Obama's character. One is fighting, contest as such, realizing that you have real enemies and that you've got to outflank them in some way. And the other is bargaining. First person getting into the thick of it, bargaining with Congress, bargaining with opponents, bargaining with people who ought to be your friends. He just doesn't have...
Well, David, let me tell you, somebody who's been through law school and had my share of constitutional law professors and professors of every kind, I do understand that persona.
Right.
And I saw the persona. But I have to tell you, even as I was watching Obama in the primaries, I said, well, he's a little different. Whatever the narrative is a little different from what I'm seeing, what I had been so used to seeing in law school. And, of course, I've practiced law for 30 years, so it's not that I'm unaware of some of the trades you're talking about. But I think the thing that people now are realizing, I think more and more, is that when you drill down and you follow the money on this candidate, when you follow the money on this person and the candidate in the primaries, you start understanding, well, he kind of did come out of nowhere. All of a sudden we start seeing Robert Rubin money behind him. We start seeing Penny Pritzker money behind him. We start seeing Wall Street money behind him. He's this perfect candidate that it seems very easy to kind of gain control of. And I can't help but think there's some element of that.
Yeah, I think you're right that his attraction over time, but, getting pretty heavy in 2007 when we didn't hear about it, and in 2008 when he picked his economic team from out of the Goldman Sachs hit parade. I mean, I think at that time, those associations and putting those people in positions of power hemmed him in. And, I mean, let's not place him as the victim in this. They committed him to support for a lot of the existing structures that weren't part of his campaign. At the same time, I think that this man, partly because of the peculiar charmed life he had, actually believed that you could have it both ways, that he could have the Wall Street people in there tight and at the same time persuade them to do something more rigorous, say, than the Dodd-Frank reform, and that he could do it by force of personality and rallying the popular forces behind him even while he had Wall Street in his corner. I think the having it both ways is part of what his life has been, and he thought of it that way. But
in other words, he's gotten by with that formula. That is, that it's a contradiction in many ways, but that formula is I'm a little bit of this and I'm a little bit of that in the way that I view the world and the way that I interact.
Look how often he uses the phrase "all of the above." We ordinary citizens of life know that you can't have all the above. X doesn't go with not X.
Yeah.
But in his world, Penny Pritzker goes with, the most noble-minded black school teacher, agitator in favor of public education in Chicago. And, but no, it doesn't work like that.
David, if you really think about it, and I've, of course, having done media, television, radio on this issue for years. I mean, I was the guy on Fox News that was the liberal having to beat back three crazy people about Obama. And I think the thing that I think we were all kind of overtaken with was his ability to speak. I mean, to eloquently give a great vision of where America should be. His ability to give us this picture that we could visualize was a John F. Kennedy kind of message that he knew how to deliver.
Yeah,
and then you'd look behind it. Within 40 days, it was meaningless.
Yeah, it's in his face, which is an unusually, I don't know how to put it.
No, it's a kind face. It's a kind face.
Kind, and it seems attentive and to take things in. Again, a contrast with Bush, who had that sort of closed, defensive, whatever you want to call it. There's that, and then there's the attempt and reach of the words. I mean, myself, I've heard the word eloquent and soaring words used a lot about Obama. I don't think it's hindsight. I seldom found his words to be as such, if you read them cold on the page, to be so remarkable, with one exception of the speech he gave in response to the attack on his association with Jeremiah Wright, the speech he gave during the campaign on race. That was out of the ordinary. That was an unusually closely argued and remarkable speech. But I think it's a voice and it's a style of presentation that's very assuring and reassuring. But I think when you look at it, and especially starting around early 2010, I mean, the amount of platitude, the amount of sheer optimistic banality in his speaking is right up there with Reagan and Clinton.
Well, somebody recognized that, David. Somebody recognized that. His handlers recognized it. That's where they attach change and hope and
right.
we can. Yeah. That is, I thought it was very, your take on, by the way, your work on this is superb. Okay, you're talking to a guy that's followed him from day one as being a huge advocate, from defending him on virtually every network I can think of, to now saying, how could I have been so wrong? But there are a lot of people out there just like me, if they're honest with themselves. You see, I think you have this issue of progressives. They're looking for that hero. They're looking for that man who will pull the sword out of the stone and lead them through this next generation.
Yep.
And they're so hungry for that hero. I'm not Democrat. I'm independent, by the way. But as I watched him, I was thinking, okay, well, this may be that person who can pull the sword out of the stone for these progressives.
Yeah.
And I think the disappointment doesn't allow progressives to say, let's be honest about what we've got here.
Yeah. Well, I mean, a piece of the article that I didn't write because it was long enough already would have said, if you want in the two-party system to have a real opposition here, the Democrats, and I am very, very distantly associated with Democrats now. I would almost describe myself as an independent now, except that the Republicans always seem to put up somebody so brutal and disgusting that I've only voted for one Republican in my life, and that was Lowell Weicker when he ran in Connecticut. But, I do think that the Democrats, as the other party, as I sometimes call them, the party of Republicans are the party of privilege. The Democrats are the party of slightly less privilege. And, if they want to be an opposition of any kind, they have to get over Obama. They have to get over the idea that this man whose idea of opposition is to say, wait for the Republicans, they'll get over the fever. Well, they didn't get over the fever in the debt ceiling crisis in 2011. They didn't get over the fever after the election, the midterm election in 2010, where he had already assured us that would happen. He is always moving towards the belief that he can co-opt people, that people can come together in the center. but where the center includes, continuation of holding permanent detainees in a war on terror in violation of the Fourth, Fifth, and Sixth Amendment and so on, you have to say, no, you want a real opposition here, and you want somebody who will stand up for principles.
David, as I read what you've written, again, it's superb. We want to, I guess the easy out is to say, well, he was molded, that this isn't really him, that this is the Wall Street Democrats, the holdover from the Clinton years, the Rubin crowd.
No, but he chose them.
That's my point. That's where you land with this. In other words, he had the right to say, I could have taken this other road. I could have taken this progressive road. I could have taken the kind of the Elizabeth Warren, Bernie Sanders, White House, Sheldon Whitehouse kind of road. But this is where I ended up. Yep. Because this is what I wanted. That's inescapable when you really try to analyze these facts, isn't it?
I think so, and the signs were there not only in the choice of personnel for his economic team, but in taking Hillary Clinton for Secretary of State. I don't think Hillary Clinton, I should add, has been at odds with what Obama wanted to do in foreign policy. I think she was, she's farther toward an optimistic view of the war on terror and American force projection in the Middle East. That was plain in things she said about Iran during the primaries. I think she really believes those, the U.S. power. And it's plain in the way she and her group at the State Department pushed him to intervene with NATO and bomb Libya and overthrow a third government in the Middle East. I think what she is plain, and the fact that she didn't very much depart from his foreign policy is plain. But the choice of Hillary Clinton was so strange, given if you go back to the contest of the primaries and given the fact that Obama had mainly defined himself against her on foreign policy.
Yes. Well, let me move to this. You've got so we have Hillary coming up. Now, this ties into Obama, I think, very cleanly. You've got the Democrats certainly at a point where they're at the fork in the road. They say, okay, do we go down this same path? Do we continue what Obama did, making the first Hillary, making the first Clinton years even stronger? Do we continue there? Do we opt for the Elizabeth Warren kind of idea that we've got to do more for this country, that we have to do bottom-up kind of building rather than top-down? Now, with Hillary, it's very clear what leadership wants, and it's the same leadership, even though, I know you talk about this, everybody's clear on, the Hillary camp and the Obama camp did not really get along all that well, but now they are getting along. So it's another projection of the early Clinton years, isn't it? I don't, maybe you see this differently. I hope you do.
To an amazing extent, I've come to think there is no Obama camp. It is a cult of personality, and the people who rallied around him, some of whom came over from Clinton, and some of whom are now ready to depart for Clinton again. I don't think he is a party player or a group actor at all, but his ideology and his practice in policy on, financial regulation and so on, I agree, is not in reality much different from Hillary Clinton. You got, in other areas, if you think of his Secretary of Education, Arne Duncan, and where the policy of race to the top goes, which is not very different from Margaret Spelling's policy under Bush. It's a testing regime, and it's favoring charter schools. I mean, that, too, is another aspect of the sort of foundation-driven, technocratic idea of how you solve problems with the help of corporations. That Obama, I think, actually believes in, and it comes from what you can only call, the elite presuppositions in his political thinking and his schooling, too. It occurred to me, thinking about what we know of the history, that Obama actually, and his family, by which I mean his daughters, they've never been to a public school after his first 9 years of life. He went to the Punahou Academy in Honolulu, Occidental College in California, Columbia University, and Harvard Law School. The daughters went to the laboratory school and then in Chicago and then to Sidwell Friends. There is no history of public education in the Obama family, and that goes very nicely with the elite ideas about how education can be introduced from above by technocratic experts. That's just one example, but I think that's his real thinking, and it correlates with his experience.
If you were to pick out what are the very short list of where he said A and then did Z, where he tells us A, this is who I am, this is what I stand for, this is what I want to do for the country.
Well, I would say the worst of it is on the broad matter of accountability. That is to say, he came out against the abuses of the war on terror from the Iowa primary, where his victory catapulted him onto the national stage, as the cliche goes. And, accountability, you must assume, for torture, rendition, also for breaking the law. That is to say, the warrantless surveillance that Michael Hayden, with Cheney's instructions, began, and so on. When Obama made his speech at the CIA assuring him that they would not be held accountable, that was an extraordinary decision. When he put on his website early on in his presidency that we're going to look forward and not backward, that was as much as to say to anybody who might have feared being held accountable, I won't be held accountable. And that, I think, from my point of view, which on this is constitutionalist and libertarian, that was to show real indifference towards the Constitution and the rule of law, and to replace it by expedience. So I think that's the greatest single departure from
Dave, quickly on Wall Street, was there any? As soon as we saw Eric Holder, we knew what was up. Eric Holder, of course, coming from Covington Burling, Washington D.C., a white-collar criminal firm is and also from the Janet Reno Justice Department. Exactly. Okay, so tell me, when you saw that, we heard him say, "I got to do something about cleaning up Wall Street. They've got to be responsible," and then that's A, and then Z is what?
Well, the Z is that there has been very little prosecution of Wall Street, delinquents. There has been some by the Security Exchange Commission, but that's not the same as the Justice Department. And in that, you have to feel Holder was following a very clear directive from Obama.
Yes,
we can't afford to alienate.
Well, that was my next question. In other words, Holder didn't just do this. You meet with the president, you say, look, do we prosecute these white-collar criminals the same way we prosecute a young man who's selling 2 ounces of marijuana? And of course not. No, we let them go.
I don't think Holder operates independently of the president's will.
No, he certainly does not. David, I got to tell you, I interview a lot of people. This is the best handling of this presidency that I've seen so far. So,
well, thanks a lot.
Thank you for joining me, okay?
Okay, bye-bye.